Hello, I'm Ed O'Keefe in Washington. Tonight on America Decides, a new edict from the White House. President Trump seeking to freeze trillions of dollars in federal aid. And just in, a federal judge in Washington has issued what they call an administrative stay in that funding fight, pausing the funding freeze until at least Monday, February 3rd at 5 p.m. to allow for further litigation. The president had aimed to halt funding for foreign aid, funding for non-governmental organizations, diversity, equity, and inclusion, or, quote, woke gender ideology programs, and funding related to the so-called Green New Deal, which, of course, was never officially legislation ever signed into law. The funding freeze is among the first questions asked of the new White House press secretary, Karoline Leavitt, holding her first press briefing this afternoon.
It is the responsibility of this president and this administration to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars. The American people gave President Trump an overwhelming mandate on November 5th, and he's just trying to ensure that the tax money going out the door in this very bankrupt city actually aligns with the will and the priorities of the American people.
Immigration crackdown. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem takes the helm today. It comes just hours after she joins an immigration raid in New York City. The operation, which agency officials say targeted murderers, kidnappers, and other criminals. Let's start tonight with Olivia Rinaldi and Major Garrett. Major, of course, is our chief Washington correspondent who spent most of today alongside the Homeland Security Secretary in a city, we should point out, New York, that has been cooperating with federal officials. Let's take a listen to part of Major's conversation with the Homeland Security Secretary.
Some might say, isn't New York a sanctuary city? But you said the mayor's been cooperative?
The mayor's been fantastic. In fact, I talked to him on the phone probably 4 or 5 times last night. How on one of these individuals was so dangerous that we needed the backup of the NYPD to be there in case things went south.
So, Major, what did you learn by seeing these operations? And did you really have to wear a bulletproof vest?
So tactical gear was provided to everyone. And they were pretty insistent. Matter of fact, it was not really negotiable. We had to wear it. So, to make one very important distinction, the New York City Police Department cooperated with one of the 3 immigration actions that we witnessed this morning, all pre-dawn. It was one involving someone who had a criminal warrant and had a very lengthy set of charges. New York City Police policy, through the mayor, Eric Adams, is when there is a criminal warrant, they can and will assist, if requested, federal immigration officials, which is exactly what happened. The 2 other immigration actions we witnessed did not involve New York City Police because there were no warrants involved, and that is a delineation that's important to the city of New York. It's important to other cities with so-called sanctuary city status, as New York has. So that is the difference. And the mayor did talk to Kristi Noem, the Homeland Security Secretary, 4 times on Sunday because the Homeland Security Secretary said, look, we would like New York City PD to be there as backup in case this thing gets out of hand. Trust me, based on my observation, Ed, there were about 60 or so personnel involved in this first action against this criminal illegal immigrant. There was a massive presence of tactically geared Homeland Security investigation personnel, overwhelming show of force. They broke into the apartment. They arrested 4. 3 children were also taken into custody, not because of their immigration status, but just to find out if they could receive some kind of care while the 4 adults were being detained and the 1 criminal immigrant sought was being set on a path to eventual deportation. So, massive show of force throughout, and all of the episodes that we observed personally ended without incident or hassle.
That does seem like a lot for one guy.
It was a lot.
Is this the plan for every single arrest they're going to try to make across the country, or are they just doing this because cameras also happen to be rolling?
Look, clearly there was interest in having cameras present. There's no doubt about that. There were other parts of this very large team, I would say 90 or so federal officials, which included ICE, HSI, which is Homeland Security Investigations, DEA, ATF, and U.S. Marshals, all involved. They were also fanning across the city. Local media was tipped off to those, which indicates a high interest in having cameras present. Some call that performative law enforcement. Others call it a way of spreading the message, creating deterrence, and a sense that this is going to be different than the Biden administration, and the new policies are going to be imposed and enforced aggressively. And clearly that's one of the messages they want to send. I'm not a law enforcement expert. I'm not going to tell you it was overkill. I'm just telling you, based on my observation, there was a tremendous show of force, and it felt and it looked larger than required. But again, those are tactical judgments I defer to the experts on.
And of course, let's remember, this is a president who chose cabinet secretaries based on how telegenic they look, whether they can play the part in public. And Noem clearly today, ball cap on, tactical gear, tweeting about it, talking to you, probably fulfilling the wishes and expectations of the president who wanted to see her do this. Hang with us for a second, Major, because this other issue here today, freezing grants and loans, is sweeping and has swept the country today with real confusion. Olivia, who helps cover the White House with us, do we have any sense, before this judge's order that just came in, of who this could have potentially affected?
Well, that was the big question today, right? We heard about this memo, but who actually was impacted? And the confusion not only trickled down from the federal government, but to state governments across the country. People calling their constituents in Congress, expressing mass concern about what they would have access to, what grants, loans, federal assistance. Caroline Leavitt, in the press briefing today, said that certain benefits like Social Security, Medicaid, other grants and loans would not be impacted. But what we saw was that Medicaid websites across the country were down. Right. They said this is not related. They said, could have been just a coincidence. But in any case, it caused a lot of confusion, panic, worry among people. We're already starting to see some action from Democratic AGs, but also nonprofit coalitions across the country asking what is going on, when this pause will be lifted, when they could have access to more of this federal funding.
I want you to listen to what Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer had to say today about the real-world effects of this memo. Take a listen.
It's a dagger at the heart of the average American family in red states, in blue states, in cities, in suburbs, in rural areas. It is just outrageous.
So how's the White House responding to all this confusion?
Well, a lot of questions in the press briefing today about this. Caroline Leavitt said she would provide a list of the organizations that are impacted. What they're trying to stress from the White House is that this memo is not to impact those federal funds and assistance that people need that help them get by in their daily life, on health care to food. But what this does is impact those, quote, pet projects that Trump wants to make sure are in line with his priorities and not the priorities of people who are perhaps in the federal government, career service officials. They're trying to make that distinction, going on cable channels and making this clear, but still a lot of confusion. Now we have this judge's order that is pausing this until next Monday so people can file litigation against this move from Trump. I suspect this is just one of many things we're going to be tracking in the coming weeks that could impact the Americans.
Major, this is something that the president, then the candidate, campaigned on. In fact, we have a clip that sort of speaks to that. Take a listen.
I will do everything I can to challenge the Impoundment Control Act in court and, if necessary, get Congress to overturn it. To prepare for this eventuality, on day one, I will order every federal agency to begin identifying large chunks of their budgets that can be saved through efficiencies and waste reduction using impoundment.
Impoundment. He was talking about it in June 2023. Quickly, yes. Remind the audience, what is this and what is it a bigger fight over?
So this has been litigated many times. Goes back to Richard Nixon. President saying, Congress appropriated money, but I don't want to spend it, and I'm going to hold it back for things I want to spend it on. Courts have said presidents can't do that. The Constitution is clear on this. And as you well know from your experience covering the federal government, Ed, once contracts are sent and sealed by the federal government, they cannot be rescinded. Right. But those things that haven't yet been contracted and are still in the process of being contracted can be reevaluated. On the reevaluation side, this administration is probably legally safe. On the contracting side, it is not.
This is a legal fight the White House wants, and it has begun. And we will, of course, cover it. Olivia Rinaldi, thank you. Major Garrett, more of your reporting and your time with Kristi Noem on the CBS Evening News and CBS Mornings tomorrow. We appreciate it. Thank you both.